The W3D1 folder basically has our character that we're going to be working on. It's more superhero, doing a superhero theme. This year a little bit more stylized. There's also a couple little kind of breakdowns that I sketched up in terms of taking that type of character's proportions, which is a little bit more obviously stylized in terms of especially head in relation to body and torso length and things like that. But then looking at key markers and things we have to pay attention to as we begin modeling and as we go through that process. So we're going to get started with that tomorrow. Again, I just want to go through kind of an entire process just from beginning to end with a simple object. And again, this morning we just did this very simple kind of pair of classes where we just created our hierarchies, everything's labeled and put together, and using some of the similar tools that we've discussed. So I'm going to start with a new scene. Now, did everybody copy over those folders? I might as well take attendance. And I'm just going to mention a few things off the top. So first things first, attendance. Let me just go. There we are. Let's see. And, oh yeah, let me just fix this one. We talked about it, and I didn't get around to doing this last week, so let me do that. Cool. And let me just go back over to, there we are. While that's opening up, shotgun, I just want to talk a little bit about shotgun for 2 seconds. First thing, under, oh, did I paste this twice? I must have. Under systems, the systems project in shotgun, so that's the SYS project, I did put 2 little welcome notes at the top. The second of which kind of goes through the grading, or not grading, sorry, the labeling suffixes, so the end portion of our labeling, all the different abbreviations. And just kind of outlines, again, the way we're approaching the labeling. So if you get confused or can't quite remember what needs to be what, in terms of what gets labeled as a group or a joint or something like that, geometry, are some of the things we've talked about so far. Again, the list of most of the things we're going to be talking about are here. And if we do discuss additional labeling suffix or abbreviations, I'll just add that to this list. All right, so that's there. Also, under shotgun, if you guys haven't had a chance to yet, let me just go over to people and filter this. So it is filtered, okay. I can see a lot of people have started updating their photo. If you guys could, at some point over the next day or so, upload kind of a headshot similar to what your instructors, like myself or Noel, have done here. What this will allow us to do is very quickly and easily start putting faces to names. Because it's still going to take me another week probably before I start remembering everybody. But it'll be much faster if I can, look at people's faces on the GO train ride home and just start putting them to the associated name. So again, if you guys could help me out and upload your pics. What we used to do in the past is just collect all of the student cards and photocopy them, but this way you can choose your own picture and again, upload that yourself if you could. That'd be awesome. All right, so that's it for shotgun for now. Let's see, we got attendance. Let's go through this. Camille? Oh, there you are. Cool. Let's see. Madeline? Okay. Renata? Okay. Renato. A Young. Cool. Puyan. Cool. I noticed some of you in Shotgun, I know there's some preferred names as well. So Puyan, Brian, do you prefer Brian?
Yeah, I go with Brian.
Okay, cool. So again, having the pictures there, it lets me kind of quickly see, preferred names, things like that, and because I can't really change the attendance naming conventions. Mark?
Yeah.
Cool. Ashay?
Yeah.
Chun Hui? Cool. Anil?
Yeah.
Cool. Tao?
Yeah.
Okay. Wei Wei? Awesome. Zijuan? Cool. Hui?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yu Peng? Cool. And Yun? Oh, awesome. Great, good stuff, guys. All right. All here, that's great. All right, so if you've copied over the folders, we have glasses, and let me just make sure I'm in my M drive, which is right here. We've got glasses, and we've got the W3D1. What we're going to do is we're going to create a project for glasses, and we're just going to go through a process of modeling these. And we didn't quite get to the screws this morning, or the hinges, I should say, but if we can work through this a bit faster this afternoon, maybe we can get to it. But think of this as we're going to be working through this together. I want you guys to ask questions. If you're stuck on anything, I'll come around and help you out, just so we're on the same page as we move into the character. I want you guys to become familiar with moving and reproportioning things, as well as getting more custom, climatized to the tools we're using. So what we need to do is create a project for this. Right now, this is just a folder that has these two JPEGs, or one's a JPEG, and the other one is a PNG. And we're going to take one of these two, this one in particular, into Maya so we can use it as a reference, which is kind of a bit newer compared to what we've done in the past couple weeks. So the process is just it's called creating an image plane that we can, again, use for a reference. Now, this was grabbed from the internet. I didn't take this picture, obviously, myself. There's no real side profile view, so we are just really going to be using the front view for this. We can use this for some indication on some of the detailing, but for the most part, it's going to be the front view. Ideally, when you're doing your own models, taking your own picture is a good idea. If you do, though, and I don't know what kind of, obviously your iPhone is great if you could use that, but having a longer lens is a good idea, like more of a telephoto lens. Because what that does is it minimizes distortion. So the longer the lens, the flatter objects look. So the saying on TV adds like 10 pounds or 5 pounds, whatever it is. For me, it's 10 pounds. And the reason for that is that they're using these longer lenses on the video equipment or the camera equipment so that they don't have to be so close to the personalities on TV. And those longer lenses are actually squishing the perspective out, which makes you look a little bit less lean, let's say that. So if you're going to take your own photos, again, a longer lens would be ideal. Otherwise, you do have to think about lens distortion and things like that. But nothing beats having an iPhone and going out and about and getting your own reference material, because then you don't have to worry about copyright issues that could come up as well, which we'll discuss later. All right. But not worrying about copyright at the moment. I've got these images from the internet that we're going to use. So the first thing we're going to do is open up Maya. And we're going to create a project for this. So again, we're just going to run through the process from beginning to end. And wherever we kind of finish off with the model, we'll just kind of wrap it up and label and organize things accordingly. So we're going to go into... because we don't have an actual scene yet, we're going to create a brand new project, and I don't want to spend too much time on some of these things I've already talked about, but I'll just run through these stages again. And I'm pretty sure it's recording. Yep, there we are. Okay, so in our project window, we want to start by clicking on the word new and navigating to your M drive, making sure that you're saving everything to the M drive, which I'm in at the moment. So M systems. And we're going to give it a name. So we're going to call this glasses underscore 2017. And I'll just call this one group B, so, since I already have a folder like this. And accept. Next thing we're going to do is go back over to our folder, and we're going to copy and paste the images in glasses. Excuse me. We're going to copy these guys, the two images that are in the glasses folder, so copy. And we're going to paste these images into our project and into a very specific folder in our project. So glasses 2017. We're going to paste these into the source images directory. Source images is the default directory Maya looks to when you want to bring in an outside image. So having our images there just minimizes having to search around to find where these things are located. Yep.
So is it a reference folder?
Nope. This one, these are just images that, although these are images we're using for visual reference, this isn't a file reference like what we were doing the other day. So this is a bit different. So things we're going to use from Photoshop or JPEGs we might buy from iStock or download from the internet, they would go in here. Now we can organize these if we needed to. If we had, say, 100 different, you're doing modeling for the hybrid, you're going to have different components. You have like screws and sockets and maybe chassis and various components. So you might want to organize those by folders within this directory. So for example, I could have a glasses or chassis or something, and then all my reference material would go into this, just to organize so it doesn't become a giant directory full of 1,000 images that you have to sort through. We're only dealing with two images at the moment, so for now we can just keep them right in the source images root source, if I can speak, root source images folder. All right. So let's just make sure that our project is actually set. It normally is when you create a project, but for some reason this morning it wasn't. So let me just go and open a scene for a second quickly. It did. So it should automatically come up into our, we're not opening anything, we don't have a scene to open. All right. So we're going to bring in one of those images as what's called an image plane. So it's basically a plane that can exist in wireframe or shaded mode that we can use to kind of match proportions and sizes and things like that too. Using image planes, and we're going to be using this with our character starting tomorrow as well, we want to make sure we're associating the image plane to the proper type of camera. Typically, we don't want to apply this to our perspective camera, and I'll show you why in just right now. If you guys could just watch and not do this. So I'm going to go and import an image plane. Now you'll see that the images are in my scene, but they've been locked to the camera. They're not actually kind of stationary. So if I'm modeling something and I want to move around it, as soon as I move my camera, it's going to become misaligned or unaligned to the actual image. So typically we don't want these on the actual perspective camera. Typically we're going to select the camera that the image represents. And this is kind of important. So we're looking at, I would say, the front of our object here. This is what we're going to be using because it's relatively symmetrical. So we're looking at the front of the object. So which camera do you think we should associate that to? Yeah, the front camera. So if we had a side view, then we would associate that side view to the side camera. So you can have multiple angles associated to different cameras, essentially. But for now, again, we're just using the one. So what we're going to do is go over to our front camera. And remember, they're labeled just right down here at the bottom, so you know which camera you're in. And we're going to go and in our camera menu, so the window pane, we're going to go to View. Second from the very bottom, we've got Image Plane. And we're going to Import Image. And in here, we're going to grab this guy, glasses.png. There they are. Now you can see just quickly, if I go to my perspective, that now basically that stays, it'll be locked to my front camera. It'll move around with my front camera, but it'll be locked in place in perspective, so I can orbit around, and it's not going to stay fixated on the camera. Now, we have to also remember that we're dealing with units that are in centimeters. So these glasses would be great for like a Barbie doll, or maybe like a, I don't know what's popular nowadays, but like a Furby. I don't know, is Furby popular? But something like that. We probably want them a little bit bigger, and ideally, if you had a physical copy of these and took your own photos, you could also have, you know, a ruler and measure these components as exact as you can. Or even better, if you're dealing with industrial designed elements, there would be an AutoCAD, which has physical measurements that you could also use. Although technically, if you're using AutoCAD, you could even just import that right into Maya and just use that model directly. But if you have to model something from real life that doesn't exist digitally, you know, a ruler and or some kind of measuring tool, and basically photographs, and that's what you kind of have to work with typically, if you're not doing like a physical scan, like a digital scan of some kind. So I'm going to scale this up. We can scale and move our image plane just by selecting it. I'm just doing a big marquee select over top of it. And I'm going to scale it up, you know, so I'm roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe about 12 centimeters across, maybe almost double the size. And I'm going to shift it over slightly so that the center line is through the middle of the object. And I'm going to bring it down slightly as well, so that it's sitting on the ground plane, or that this darker line here. There is distortion on this object. It's not perfectly symmetrical, this picture. So, you know, we just have to take it with a grain of salt and work around it as we do our thing. One thing we looked at this morning is, how do we make this so that we don't move it now that we've got it here? Because right now, if I, you know, select geometry or something, I could grab this and accidentally move it or shift it or scale it or rotate it, or a variety of things. We could lock down the values. Now, locking these attributes will still make this thing selectable, so I just wouldn't be able to move it. There is a way we can lock it down easily and prevent it from being selected as well. And that's using this section right below our channel box. We've got this layer section. And we've got display layers, we've got anim layers, and in this version they've removed it, but there used to be render layers as well. And I've got to read up on this because I don't, to be honest, know what they've done. And it's a little bit confusing. I was in a hurry on the side project. It was actually for one of my school assignments, because I've been using a little bit of CG in some of them. And I wanted to break it down to layers, and it's like, oh my gosh, they changed everything. I don't know, and it's like literally under the gun. It was due the next morning, so I had to just kind of improvise a bit. But so I gotta read up on that. I know it's this guy right here, but I just gotta figure out what they did. All right, but that's not for a little while. And actually, I think Noel's going to talk to you guys about it anyway, so you guys can let me know perhaps. And just kidding. I'll figure it out. But display layers. So we can, just like Photoshop and Photoshop layers, we can actually break things down into individual groups and group them by layers. It sounds beneficial. Be careful about it. The more layers you have, the more likely your scene is going to become corrupted. So use these with a grain of salt. Use these sparingly, and when you hand in things for me, make sure you delete them out. I don't want to see any in here. They're a way to speed up your workflow, but again, they could become a problem if you just keep them in there later on once your character's rigged and you're animating and saving things off, and particularly once you start referencing stuff, you don't want these things in there. So let's see. Let's have look at if I can speak. It's my 5 I'm just completely breaking down. 5 a.m. morning is kind of showing at this point. This first button, if we have our image plane selected, I click on this first one. This is going to create a layer with our selection in it. We can create a blank layer by clicking on the one beside it, and we can add objects into it afterwards. But for now, let's just click on that first icon. All right, so our object's still selected. We have a layer, and we've got a couple little input boxes that we can modify. So let's take a look at what those do. First input box just basically hides whatever's in the layer by turning the visibility. It stands for visibility, the V, on and off. The second input box, I think this is relatively new because I've never used it before. So when I was asked, hey, what does that do? I had no idea, but one of the people this morning, Pavi, suggested, well, it influences playback, and she was correct. It does. So when this is unchecked and I hit P, basically anything in that layer will disappear, so it'll improve your playback speed. So again, that wasn't an option that was there before. And with P checked, it will be visible in your playback. So I guess that would be beneficial. It speeds things up. But what we're going to look at is this option right here. And this gives us 3 options. One is the way it is now, the default, which lets this be selectable still. The second option, which is T, stands for template. Basically, this turns it into a template, which makes it unselectable within your viewport. Also hides any kind of textural information. Essentially, it's taking it and turning it into a wireframe. Now, I don't know if we'd actually be able to see the edge of that because it's not physical geometry. And then the third option is R, which is the one that we want to use, which stands for reference. Now, not a file reference like we were talking about last week, but reference in this mode basically means that you can't physically select or move the object when it's in that mode, which is what we want. We're also going to label this, so double click on layer 1. You get this pop-up window. We're going to switch this to image, plane, capital P, so camel case, image plane. If you had geometry and you wanted to color code what's in your layer, you can do that as well. So for example, if I choose this purple color, or you could also go to RGB. So right now this is the indexed colors, so pre-made colors. You can go RGB. And we can click on the little input box and go for any colors. Let's say I want to go more fuchsia or something like that. I could do that. And go save. Yep, there it is. Now, the color itself, we're not going to see unless we go into wireframe mode. Image planes are always going to be visible, textured in wireframe mode. So you'll never see an image plane's wireframe. But let's create an object and we'll add it into this layer and remove it from the layer, so just so we can see this. And it's also going to be an object we're going to use to begin the modeling process for this. So I'm going to start by grabbing this pipe geometry right here beside the T, this guy. Right here. And I'm going to shift it over to the screen right is technically the left side of the glasses. If we were putting them on our head, this would be the left side. Because remember, Z handle is pointing in a positive direction, so it's technically looking this way. But anyhow, screen right. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, so you can put it in X. You can input 90 degrees here if you wanted to. Or I might want to turn on my discrete rotate, which I had set up last week, which allows me to rotate at 45-degree increments. I'm not going to get back into that, but we did talk about that last week. And what I want to do is, well, let me just scale that up just a little bit so that basically the high and low points match the high and low points of the frame of the glasses, roughly. There we go, something like that. So what I'm going to do is add that to my image plane layer. Now to do that, you just have to make sure your object is selected. And we're going to right click on the word image plane. And if we go down, just second from the top here, we can add selected objects. So now this is added into that layer, which unfortunately at the moment renders it unselectable because we have it set to reference. If I want to select something again though, it's really easy. All you do is just click the R one more time, turns it off. And this way, if I go to wireframe, we can see that, yeah, it is actually inheriting the color from that layer. So anything in that layer will get that fuchsia color now. And then what we're going to do is, what are we going to do? Something. Take it out of that layer. So I'm going to select that object again. To remove something from a layer, just right click on the display layer again. And third from the top, we've got remove selected objects. So it's really easy to add in and remove objects from your display layers. All right, this is going to be the start of our object. I do want to work on two objects across from one another. It'll just give me a better idea of proportion and form, having a completed glasses frame. So what we're going to do is we're not going to use the symmetry tools right at the moment today. We're going to create kind of a fake symmetry with the reflection of this object, like looking in a mirror. You know, when you do something in the mirror, your reflection does the exact same thing. And we looked at this a little bit last class using the duplicate special functions, in this case an instance. Now when we duplicate something, if we want to duplicate it across the axis so it's in the exact same spot, we want to make sure that the pivot is at origin, essentially. Because right now if I were to duplicate this, and if I were to scale it negative, you know, it doesn't look like it's changed, right? It hasn't moved. It's still in the exact same position, although it is technically inverted. It's a negative version of itself. And the reason why is that it's scaled, or mirrored, I should say, over where the pivot is. So in this case, it's not going to appear to do anything. So we want to take that pivot point and snap it to origin, or at least just to the x-axis. So this thicker line here at origin, this vertical line. So to do that, again, tap the D key. That goes into your input mode, which allows us to move the pivot around. You'll notice that the transformation tool changes into kind of like an omni tool, so it has rotation and scale and translate controls. And then what we're going to do is shift that over. Now, I wanted to make sure this is perfectly snapped to that center point. So to do that, we're going to hold down the X key. Now, by holding the X key down, if you were to look at my mouse here, it's actually toggling this button on and off. So this, if you want it on for a long time, you could just leave it on like that by clicking on it up here. Or holding the X key, again, allows us to do what's called a grid grid snap is the snapping tool for the grid, essentially. So I'm going to hold down the X key, and using my X handle, so that red handle, I'm just going to shift it over. Now, to make sure you're right on the origin or that center line, you might want to do this in the front camera. Because if you're off even by a little bit, it's not going to be perfectly symmetrical. And when we have two sides and put them together, there'll be a little bit of a seam or a gap in between the two halves. So we just want to make sure that's perfectly aligned. All right. And then what we're going to do is mirror that, duplicate special on this using an instance. And we looked at instances a little bit last class. So we're going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, Option Box. And let me reset the settings here. Don't forget, you can always reset your settings by going to Edit and then Reset Settings. And I want to turn on Instance. And I also want to set up my mirror within here as well. So I know for a fact I'm using the front camera. I'm going to be mirroring across the X-axis, which is going to be -1 in scale. When we're looking at these three boxes side by side, basically it's X, Y, and Z. It's always going to be in that order when you see them like that. So the first box is X, which is what I want to mirror it across. If you're not sure, you can always click on the scale attributes, and whenever you do this, the handle that's associated with it will turn yellow, and you'll know that, yeah, in this case, it's this horizontal left-right handle, so that's the X-axis in this case. Apply. So now I've got two, looks like an owl a little bit, but I've got two of these. Now we've got perfectly mirrored symmetrical objects. Now we looked at instances a little bit last class where, you know, these will move mirror to one another. They'll do the exact same thing, because if you recall, and just to very quickly do this again, let me see, show shapes. There you are, shapes. If you recall, they have different transformation nodes, which means I can select and move these and scale them independently of one another. Because don't forget, we're only moving the transformation node. The shape node's going along for the ride. It's inheriting those positional values. But they have the exact same shape node. And because we've mirrored this over into the negative, it's going to get the exact opposite kind of movement as what we do on this side. So it's going to create that mirrored illusion, essentially, or that look. Make sense, kind of? Cool. All right. First thing we're going to do, again, when you start any shape, no matter really how complex it is, you want to break it down into its primitive kind of forms. And then we're going to kind of work around that. So with these glasses, I'm just going to snap it over to my front orthographic camera. When we're kind of dealing with objects with thickness, like we currently have with the cylinders, again, you usually want to use your orthographic cameras for moving points around. If I go to wireframe, you can see that we're looking directly through the object, so we're not having any kind of, there's no perspective distortion. So it makes it really easy to select front and back facing vertices that way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the inner circle, and I'm going to scale this just so that it's a little bit thinner. Now notice how I'm scaling this. I'm scaling it in the different axes independent of one another. As soon as you have thickness and you're scaling an object like I am here, which appears to be faster, what's actually happening though is it's going to scale it outwards as well, because it's volumetric when there's thickness, which we don't want. We want to keep this relatively planar or flat in the front. So again, by using these two handles, it lets me do that. So again, I'll do this from the front camera. I'm just going to try to match the thickness of my object. As I do this, I'm going to keep this in low resolution, so level 1 on the keyboard. Something like that. And I'm going to grab everything and just scale it out just a little bit. I mean, there's only so much I can really scale it out before it gets too far out of the object. So I just want to kind of match some of the angles here, or the curvature, I should say. And then what's gonna happen is I just have to go in, and again, all in my orthographic camera. Another reason why I'm doing this, not just for selection. Oh, let me make sure I've got my image plane set to reference. Not just for selection, but when I'm moving things around, if I stay in my orthographic cameras, it's going to stay planar. So that means the front is going to be, it'll stay flat. If I move any of these around in my perspective camera, if I don't use the actual handles, which will keep it planar for the most part, depending on which move tool you're using. But what could happen when you're moving these around in the perspective window is that, you know, things can start breaking apart and become wavy or wonky or lumpy. So again, if I want to keep everything nice and flat, which in this case the model is relatively flat, I want to do that in my orthographic camera, in this case the front camera. And I'm just going to go around matching the thickness and curvature of my glasses. I'm not going to position this for the nose. I'm going to do an extrude for that. But again, I'm just kind of matching the curvature, the overall curvature of the glasses. Now there are some spots where the thickness changes between the front and back, and in those I'll just independently take the two sections and move them separate from one another. Again, trying to maintain a nice overall curvature again to this. And fewer points are obviously better, right? Because if you had a lot more points than what we're using currently, it would take a lot longer to do. So we want to kind of do this type of early kind of positioning with less points. Now, a couple of things you might have noticed here. I flattened out the end here, but not gone all the way out to this point where the arms are actually connected. And then I've also kind of flattened out this area here where the bridge of the frame over the nose will go. And the reason for that is that I am going to extrude this portion out. So I want to make sure that, you know, it's a nice flat starting point. We can quickly flatten an object without having to snap it to a grid just by selecting it. In this case, I'll select both these two faces here. And I can just scale it into itself. So just taking, in this case, I'd probably want the X handle, just scaling it down into itself, down to 0. Well, and until it won't let me scale anymore, and I'm at that point, basically indicates it's perfectly flat. So if you were to watch just for a quick second, if I were to demonstrate it on something simple, or more simple, so I have a lumpy object here. Right? So if I wanted to flatten that, again, I could do a grid snap. That's an easy way to do it, just by selecting the verts, snapping it to a grid. That will perfectly flatten everything pretty quickly. Sometimes you don't have that option where you want to keep it around the same area without snapping it to a grid. again, you would just turn on the scale tool and scale down whichever angle best suits, you know, where you want the flat portion to be, and you just scale it down to itself, down to the middle handle, and that'll flatten it out relatively fast as well. And then basically, once it doesn't scale anymore, you know it's perfectly flat, and this isn't moving, so that's perfectly flat. And that's kind of a quick cheat for doing that type of thing. My glasses are a little bit thick. I might as well just select this. Now remember, when we're scaling objects, if you were to just grab it and scale it, it's not going to mirror. We have to do everything on a component level. So faces, edges, vertices, that type of thing, if we wanted them to both do the exact same thing together. And like I said, I'm not worried too much about level 3 smoothing, because at the moment it's going to be just way too rounded and organic. It's not going to look enough like my object, and that could be distracting at this point. It might want me to throw in some additional edges too early, which I don't want to do, because it'll complicate things. So again, I'm just keeping it low res at the moment. All right, let's select these two faces that are that'll become the bridge, essentially. And what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this out. Now I can't use the bridge tool in this instance because these are the same shape node. I can't combine them. Well, I can combine them, but I don't want to just yet. I just want to keep this kind of workflow going. So instead of bridging, what I'm going to do is a simple extrude. So again, I have these two faces selected. So these two faces are selected. I'm going to extrude them by clicking on the extrude button, this guy right here, if you haven't used it through practicing, this guy. And remember, only click it once. If you click it more than once, it's going to cause some problems. Actually, it might be, let's undo that. I'm going to undo. Undo, there we go. Let's double click on the extrude tool. And the reason why I'm doing that is that maybe it's a good idea to reset this tool, just in case from last week you might have some values in there that could cause some problems perhaps. So I'm going to go reset the settings, and I'm going to do it again. Now, one thing I want to do, again, because I want to keep this planar, I want to keep this flat, is that I might not use the extrude manipulator. Remember, this moves tangent to our surface. So even if there's a very incremental angle to that plane that we might not visibly be able to see, it's going to become no longer planar. It might go off on a slight angle as it moves. So to make sure that it stays planar, I'm just going to hit the W key so that I can just move it the way we would typically move an object, in this case towards that center line. Now before I snap it, I just want to do one thing very quickly. Before I snap it, I want to get rid of these two faces, these inside faces. These could cause a lot of problems if I do combine these down the road, and if I do end up merging merging vertices and whatnot. We don't want to have closed faces like this with inside a shell of an object. That's referred to as non-manifold geometry, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. We have these kind of T-shaped kind of structures. So again, we want to kind of remove these if we can before kind of going forward. So I'm going to select both of them, the faces, and delete, which will open that up. So again, just selecting those faces and deleting. Because we have a border edge, I can now just go into my edge mode, double click on that border edge, and I can snap this to the center using the X key. So X again will do our grid snap, which will perfectly snap that together at origin. if you guys could just watch for a second, I just want to show you something else about the X key, because it's probably going to apply to you. I changed these settings this morning. All right, and I'll simplify this again. So simplify, something like this. All right, so I've got these random points here. I want to snap these to an edge in a line, like a grid snap. Something like this, where they're all perfectly aligned. The default, though, has this setting turned on, and we can access our translation contextual menu by holding down W and the left mouse button. So typically you're going to have this option on. Now, what this option does is that when it does a snap, it'll still snap, but when it snaps, though, what it is snapping the averaged center of your selection. So it's not really going to flatten things out. It's really just going to snap the pivot for the selection, essentially. So we want to make sure that, again, W, left mouse button, are held down, and we're turning this off, keep spacing. Another thing you just want to make sure is that when you're doing snapping, where you're snapping a lot of points or edges, and you want to make sure they're all aligned in a perfectly flat row, you want world turned on for this. Otherwise, it won't do it at all. So now when I do this, see, a perfect snap. It just perfectly aligns. All right, so back to the ortho, just so I can tweak this position a little bit. So it looks like I need more definition there. I probably need another loop between these two edges that goes through the middle, just so I can define the bridge of the nose or the frame a little bit better. And this goes back to another tool we used last week, which is our multi-cut tool, which allows us to insert edge loops. And if you recall, it's this icon right here on the in the shelf. And if I hold down the control key, this lets me bring up my tool. I can slide this along an edge and pick where I want to place that new loop, which is probably about there. And as soon as I hit enter, it'll solidify and become part of my model. And I probably just want the one for now. Cool. And I'm just going to go in and change its position, again using the orthographic hammer for this. As you're doing this, as you get more used to moving things around, just positioning things where they have a nice overall arc and flow to them as well is a good idea, because this kind of organic flow, a natural flow, will translate to your smooth version. So as opposed to, even though it's planar, having something like that, you wouldn't really notice it probably. But it could cause some little lumps or weird shadows and things like that if it gets smoothed a couple times at render time. So again, keeping a nice kind of curvy flow where you can is a good idea. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is add in the this little end piece where the frame is going to kind of connect into. And this morning I just kind of extruded this out, but I was looking at this a little bit more closely, and it does get quite thick here, and it does kind of wrap out almost like a little block to a certain degree. So I might want to approach this a little bit differently than this morning, where I'm extruding it maybe a little bit more than once. So I'm going to maybe move this in just a little bit. And this will give me the ability to extrude. And actually, I'm kind of glad I'm doing this. I notice I'm not, oh wait, this is perspective though. Let me just go back to my ortho. Yeah, maybe I could be a little bit more precise with this. So let me just move these in just a little bit more. Something a little bit more like this, perhaps. I'll extrude this out twice. All right, so I'm going to grab that face. And I'm going to extrude it out. So let me see here. Well, do I want both? Yeah, I guess I'm stuck with both now. We'll try it, see what happens. So I'm going to extrude this and move it out. And again, I'm going to move it with my W key. And I'm going to translate this so that I am matching the end position. So let's see if I can do this a little bit better. And as I mentioned, I'll need to do an additional, have an additional loop. So instead of extruding it twice, which would probably take longer to position, I've got my start, my end, and now I'm going to put the middle position in. It'll be a bit easier to do it this way. So using my multi-cut tool again. Multi-cut is one of those tools that you're just going to use all the time when you're modeling. So it's one of those things you just want to become more accustomed to selecting and accessing. Now it is a little bit rounded, so we do want to solidify this a bit. Before we do, I want to do something else just a little bit different from this morning as well, which is creating this bridge. The bridge comes out of the inside of the frame. I did that at the end. I think I can incorporate it a little bit better into the frame if I do it first, before I start solidifying the edges to add in a little bit more of a sharper crease around the corners. So I'm just going to go in to these four. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. Is it 4? I could probably get away with just the 3 maybe. Maybe 4. 3. I'll just use these 3. And I'm going to extrude that out. Just make sure I'm doing it in the right direction. And I'm going to scale it in slightly and this time I am using the manipulator, the extrude manipulator for this one. Something like that. Cool. It's really rounded. It's not really the model. The model is very lathed. It's very kind of flat on the front and back. So I'm going to do that next. And to do that, we just got to be careful because we will need to delete some of these central faces again as we extrude more geometry out. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to start by selecting this ring, this outer ring. And just these 4 kind of forward facing, if I were to go back to low res, again, it's just all the forward facing faces here on the front of the glasses. So again, sometimes easier to see if you do go to level 1 smoothing. With level 3, it might get a little confusing with the top curvature. And I'm just going to extrude that out ever so slightly. You know, I'm not even really moving it that far. And that'll give me a nice kind of beveled, machined kind of front. But you do get, as I mentioned, this seam here, this line. Because when you extrude out, we're also getting these two guys, which are also extruding out when they extrude out from this, this face, right? So when you extrude, let's see, let me grab a plane again. So when you extrude something, again, you get, even though you might not see it where the overlap might be, but you do get new geometry around the entire extrude, like everywhere, including where the opening was. So in this case, we want to make sure we're deleting these the extrusions where the shared opening is, so that we can properly connect things again. So I'm going to go back over here. And this is easier done in level 3 smoothing. Otherwise, I'd have to hide one of the halves, or focus in, Control 1 on one of the halves. But just these two guys here, I want to get rid of those. And you'll notice that as soon as I do that, this central piece snaps right back to the Now this is where it differs from this morning. This morning I did this piece at the end, this little bridge, or for the part that rests on the nose, whatever that's called. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time, where I'm going to actually grab this as part of the flat surface, not this inside piece, just the outer edge component. And I think this will better integrate it into the frame, so it doesn't quite feel as a separate component. So again, I'm grabbing the outer edge of the bridge this time. It's one of those things when you, and that actually looks a lot better. It's one of those things when you're doing it as a demo, and people are following along, you can't really backtrack too much because then it gets confusing. So it's a slightly different approach from this morning, but it seems to actually work considerably better in terms of the overall look. Yeah, so that's a lot better integrated into that. So it's a lot more seamless than this morning. Question at the back. No. So I'm not beveling any of this. What I'm doing is essentially I'm just extruding that flat planar surface essentially. So let me go through this again, just with this last piece I did. So I did the same thing for the front, where I just selected the front loop and basically all just the front facing polygons, and essentially just hit the extrude key. Now for the back, doing the exact same thing. The difference though is that we've got this little nose piece, so I don't want to grab these inside pieces, just the forward facing, or in this case the rear facing faces. So again, all of the ones that are kind of facing in the one direction. And again, hitting the extrude key. So let me do this in smooth mode so we can see this. The extrude key, again, really creates the illusion of a bevel. So we get this kind of a nice, slightly more structured feel to the surface. I will need to go in though and remove these shared faces again though, where the extrusion happened, just right here. That looks better. thickness needs a little bit more thought, but I'll leave it for now. This is where maybe flattening these pieces out might be beneficial. Cool. I'll leave that for now, though. It's not too bad. All right. Next thing I want to do before we take a break, just finish the lenses off. I want to add in, and you can kind of see it in the image plane. Let's see, maybe more down here, where the lens is inset. We've got this groove for where the lens gets fit in. So I want to add that as well. And to do that is very simple. It's a simple one to do because all we need to do is select this inside inner loop, or this inner ring of faces. And I might just maybe scale it in just a little bit, not too much though, because then it's going to soften that bevel a little bit too much. I'm going to extrude that. So extrude. Scale in the extrude slightly using my green scale handle here. I'm going to extrude again, so the G key. And this one's going to scale down slightly. And the G key one more time, one more extrude, and then one last time. And what that's done is it's created, if I were to just kind of select these two guys, created a little bit of an inner groove. Now, maybe that's a bit thick. If it's a bit thick, the easiest thing to do would be to go back and just redo them. So I'm going to redo that, so I'll go back. Okay. And I'm going to do this again. Whoops, sorry. Let me just do this. So again, you can isolate an object, Control 1. You can isolate, and de-isolate is Control 1 again. So I'm going to select this face. There's a bit of a thickness. That's okay. I'll leave it for now. I'm going to extrude that. Scale it in. Extrude it again. Move it down. Extrude it again. Move it down further. And one more just to solidify the edges. Because remember, when edges are close together, they have a sharper crease. So by doing it a couple times, I get a nice kind of angled step type of pattern to a certain degree of forming. Cool. Maybe we should save at some point, because if it crashes, we'd have to start all over again. So File, Save Scene As. I'm going to call it Glasses. Take caps off. Glasses. There you go. And then from now on, if ever I want to save a new version, all I have to do is push this button. File. Below Save Scene As, we've got Increment and Save. So if I click on that, well, first let me just change. Okay, if I click on that and go back, you'll see that it's created a new version. So now every time I click on that button, the next one will be 0002, then 0003, and it'll just keep going incrementally. So I don't have to rename anything or type anything. I can just place that button, and it'll have a new version with every click. Don't get in the habit of saving over top of the same file over and over again. If anything happens to that file, it becomes corrupted, or whatever reason, you lose it, or whatever happens, you made a mistake and saved it, you're stuck with it. You have to start over or kind of work through whatever problems you've created. So by having incremental saves, you can always go back a few versions earlier, so you don't have to, you know, you might lose maybe half an hour or an hour or whatnot. I always save whenever I don't want to do something again. That's my rule of thumb. So if I do something, don't want to do it again, I just save it at that point. Like fingers, I'm saving all the time. I hate doing fingers, so it's like, but anyhow, maybe you guys, it's actually not that bad. It used to be worse. Okay, where are we? 4 more minutes. Let's combine these and merge this into one piece of geometry. Again, we've got 2 different pieces of geometry right now. So I'm going to select both these guys, both halves. And let's combine it. So we're going to go and click on the combine button, which is right here. And that will combine the 2 into one piece, removing the instance, so it becomes one piece of geometry. You can see here that it gets added, what's this one? Oh, that. You can see it gets added below the initial two objects. But you'll still see these initial pipe 1 and pipe 2 nodes here. If I were to go into wireframe with nothing selected, and I click on either of these, pipe 1 or pipe 2, you'll notice my geometry turns pink, the combined geometry. And if I were to grab one of these groups, pipe 1 or pipe 2, and move them around, you'll notice that it actually still influences the position of the combined geometry. That's because these are the original transformation nodes from the initial 2 halves that we had. And they're still connected through construction history. So if we want to remove that, we need to delete history, which we talked about last class. So I'm going to select the new geometry, and I'm going to go File, or sorry, Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now, for some reason, we still have one of these nodes left behind. I'm going to delete it. And I know it's saved. Oh, I should mention this. You're probably wondering, well, why don't I just delete these nodes? Well, if you delete them, you'll also be deleting your geometry. So you don't want to delete them. You want to, again, select the geometry and delete by type history, which breaks the connection. So if there are any ones left behind, like I can see here, it's safe to delete that stray one. And you're left with only the one node now. The one piece of geometry. All right, let's take a break. Oh yeah, when we come back, we'll do the merging. For now, if you wanted to work through break, you can kind of finesse your geometry a little bit. Or just take a short break. I know I probably wanted to maybe tweak some of this a bit. Now, one thing I'll point out, this is merged, right? This is now one piece of geometry. I shouldn't say merged, it's combined. That means if I move one half here, the other half doesn't move, right? It's not symmetrical, it's not mirrored anymore. It doesn't have that relationship. I didn't mention this morning because we're going to start talking about it tomorrow more. But if you do combine it and you want to move things and tweak things symmetrically, all you need to do, again, is hold down the W key, so bringing up our Move Contextual menu and the left mouse button, so W, left mouse button. We've got this symmetry option here at the top. We just want to make sure we're turning on symmetry. And typically it's going to be across the x-axis, that's usually left and right of a character, so that we can leave that default on. And we're going to turn this on, symmetry. So with symmetry on, you'll notice that when I go over a face or a vertex or a edge, it turns this blue color. That's indicating that, yes, there is a symmetrical component on the other side. However, if it turns red, like some of these here for some reason, that indicates these parts are not symmetrical, and which is a little bit puzzling considering this should be purely symmetrical. probably because we haven't actually merged the middle here yet. So just be aware that when you see that it's blue, it'll come up on the other side. That's going to move things symmetrically. But I guess because we haven't fully merged it yet, maybe we're having some issues with some of these points like this, which we shouldn't do. So maybe don't use this after all, actually. I'm just going to leave it as is for now until we combine it. So let me turn symmetry off. So W, left mouse button, symmetry, and I'll just uncheck it. All right, so not symmetrical. All right, so we're good to, you're good to go. All right, I'll be back in a couple seconds. Let's take a short 10-15 minute break. All right, while we're waiting for people to, are we almost all back? I think we're back almost anyway. One more minute. Let's just put on the stash. They just have their new magazine out now. And they put together a, what's this? Oh, I see. A little montage of all the different clips from it. Cool, some neat stuff, different. And what's this one? I don't know. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. How long is this? A minute? Okay, let's watch this quickly. Awesome lighting, textures, you know, a lot of thought goes into those, the textural quality of the shaders, all those things are pretty awesome. Cool. Neat stuff. Not to focus too much on this, but I'm curious how they approach this. A lot of reference material is extremely important, no matter what you're doing, whether it's animation, modeling, story, even art direction. Not Maya. I don't know what software this is, to be honest. What is this? Is it Cinema 4D or is it? Is it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to see some really cool things come out of Cinema 4D, to be honest. There was another short that actually has some animation in it. That was pretty cool. Regardless of the software, though, the same process behind it. You get the same look in Maya, obviously, and or Houdini. Cool. All right, that was a nice little insight. That was good. Excuse me. This treadmill thing is cool. I didn't notice that inside the actual production, though, but maybe it's because the camera was moving at the same time. But that was it's a neat effect, though. All right, lots of cool things out there for reference. All right, let's get back into this. So the next thing we're going to do is just add in some arms, and time permitting, we'll take a look at how we can maybe approach the screws. Unless you wanted to get into some of the curve tools that came up this morning, somebody asked about it, and I went off on a bit of a tangent. I didn't really want to particularly cover that today, but if you guys are interested, we could maybe look at some of that as well. All right. Arms. Let's do these arms. I'm going to do this from the front camera as well, starting with the plane in this case. So let's do this here. So I've got a plane. I'm going to rotate 90 degrees. Before I actually move it or change it, I just want to reduce the subdivisions down. And I'm dealing with something that's probably going to have a few more divisions in width. Now I went with 8. This morning, maybe that was too many. Maybe I'll go with 6 instead, perhaps. And then I can just customize a little bit easier where I want additional ones to go. I'm using the front camera because I do have a rather good profile pic of the arm here on the inside, even though it is on a bit of an angle. But to start off with, just to get initial proportions, I think that's fine. Obviously, the 3/4 has perspective distortion. I can't really use that. Except for reference, I can see there's a bit of an angle and bend to them, and I can use that reference here, but I can't really use it for length or any of that. All right, so what I'm going to do is shift this over and rotate this down slightly. There we are. What I could do is shift my pivot for this, just so that it's at the start of the geometry. So if I decide to scale this, it's going to scale just away from where I have it positioned, so I don't have to worry about moving it again. And let me just scale it a little bit thicker as well. There we go. you'll notice that my move tool is now perpendicular and parallel to the grid. This because again we're in world mode for the translation. I'm going to switch this back over to object mode. So again, that's W, left mouse button, object. And this allows me now to match the angle of the geometry, so I don't get too much distortion on that. And again, I'm just matching the high and low points. I'm not distorting where this goes. I'm just trying to keep things relatively paired up. Just makes it a little bit easier if I decide to add in additional loops down the road, if I try to keep it this way. Something like that. Now we've been looking at the insert edge loop through the multi-cut tool. There's another option right now. If I click on that, or I'll just double click on it to open up the option box. Right now when I insert a loop, it doesn't really change the existing lines or edges going into it. It keeps it rather linear still. It just perfectly inserts the new loop exactly into the existing kind of structure. There is this option here called edge flow, and what this does is that it's going to look at the angles going into and out from the surrounding edges, and it's going to try its best to kind of insert that in following the flow. Now I'm not really getting a good result with this at the moment. Let me change my smoothing angle. Well, it's just smoothing angle. Let's see. Can I modify this a bit? There we go. So I'm going to reduce the percentage of this down to 50%, just so it's a little bit more reduced. But you can see here, as I insert that, it follows the kind of the trajectory of the curve a little bit better. And maybe we can see this a little bit better if I took like a low resolution, like cylinder, or in this case a pipe, again, maybe reduce down the divisions. So again, if I'm using this multi-cut tool with the edge flow turned on, again, it's going to start inserting that in. Now the default is set to 1, and typically you'll get something more like this, where you get a nicer kind of degree of roundness, I guess you could say, and it does a relatively good job of kind of placing these appropriately within the object. One thing you might want to note, if you want to place objects or these lines a little bit better along the grid, if you hold down the shift key, you can see that's kind of popping along that edge. Right now it's popping at a 10% division of that edge that it's along. You can control that through the top portion of the multi-cut tool with the snap step size. Right now it's at 10%. Let's say I only want things at quarters, or maybe just halves. So now when I hold down that shift, it's going to pop directly in the middle, which is great if you just want to loop something directly through the center of an object, or if you're hand drawing points and you want to keep it centralized. So again, that's holding down, in this case, control for the loop, and then shift to snap it. If I don't have control held down, I just hold down shift. Basically, this lets me just freely put points down, snapping it at 50% of the width of the edge, I guess. So, which makes it, if you're going to do this type of thing with the flow, the curve flow, makes it a little bit easier to insert if you're using that shift key, because it does place it a little bit more consistently, perhaps. Although you obviously don't need to do that, though. And then don't forget, similar to what we talked about before, it's easy to add in thickness, or I should say more kind of harsher edges, just by duplicating and leaving the duplicate rather close to where it was created from. And that will create a, a softer kind of beveled type of edging around it, which is nice. So you can create some interesting kind of shapes just through how you bevel, or so not bevel, sorry, how you extrude as you're going. So again, just using various extrudes. All right, where was I? So I will use the multi-cut with the edge flow. But that's actually not giving me a very good result there. Oh yeah, I'm at 100 again. Let me go down. That's still not really that good. Let me just go back to my front camera. And I'll just manually, because we're dealing with so few points. It's relatively straightforward to just manually position these as well. And I will do one more just right down through the middle of the object. So again, that's the multi-cut tool. Just so I can match this a little bit better here. All right, so I've got the overall shape in place. I can go in and just kind of get rid of the rotation I have on there. And maybe just add one more rotation in Y. Just so that it goes straight back from the glasses before I do any kind of additional things to it. And I'll do an extrude. A couple extrudes, actually. One just to get the overall thickness. Whoops. Okay, I'll do it this way so I don't have to invert anything. Then an extrude on either side. Well, I could do it one of two ways. I could extrude on either side, or what would be easier is just grabbing the central loop around the middle, and again doing another extrude this way, which will, it does a pretty good job of adding that crisp, kind of slightly beveled edge to it. Now obviously we've got this issue here on the front where we want it to be a little bit flatter like this, but we don't necessarily want to cut a hole there because the glasses might fold up and we'd see a hole in the middle. So this is where we could use that insert edge loop, so the multi-cut tool, turning edge flow off, and then just adding in one or two divisions. Whoops. Adding in one. Oh, it's not letting me divide properly here. Let's see. That's interesting. One or two divisions on the ends. Now, probably that extrude I did is causing this to happen. So if that's the case, I'm just going to kind of cheat a little bit. I'm going to start from outside of the object, holding down the Shift key. This will allow me to, or just let me start in one direction, then hold down Shift. Oh, that's interesting. It's not letting me go in a straight line in the direction I want. That's okay. I'll just go in a straight line down. I won't hold Shift down. And yeah, it's not doing anything. Interesting. Let me undo. Probably because maybe the faces were, I think because these faces are selected. Let me just go back to object mode and I'm going to do this again. I just noticed that, sorry. And those faces are on again. Let's see here. Yeah, it's still not Still not doing this for me. At least that works now. So again, from the side, with my multi-cut tool, I'm going to start and hold down the left mouse button outside of the geometry. I'm just going to drag through it, and that will just create a loop through the geometry. So again, I'm dragging from outside, creating this line, and just letting go on the other side, outside of the geometry, and it'll just leave a loop behind through the entire object. And I'm not sure why it wasn't looping, probably because of the way I extruded it, or the order I did something maybe, but that's fine. I still have these loops here now. And I probably want to maybe go back to my frame here, and it's a little late for that, but I was thinking, well, maybe I could solidify this a little bit more with another, with something, but you know what, I'll just leave it for now. Let me just move this down a little bit. That's interesting. Yeah, definitely that bevel that I added, it's causing, or not bevel, extrude, sorry, I keep saying bevel. Got that on my mind now. It's causing some of the issues, I think, but you know what, I think it's okay for now. It's okay. One thing we could do is add a little bit of a warp or bend to the glasses. Right now, you know, they're rather linearly straight. We can do this by selecting the geometry. And I could have what's called a lattice. It's another kind of deformer. It's found under the rigging module. So modeling is where we're at, so rigging. We were looking at the bend deformer the other day. So this is kind of similar to that. It's also similar to that level 1 kind of modeling where you have that cage around an object. So essentially it's that, it's a cage. But before we open it, let's just go into the option box. So deform, lattice, option box. And I'll just get you guys to turn this option off, local mode. And I'll explain what this does just on a separate piece of geometry here. This time I'll make this quite dense. All right, that's good enough. So let me just create 2 of these, and I'm going to create 2 lattices here. So 1 and 2. And these lattices I'm going to increase just a little bit, maybe 4 by 4 by 4. All right, so this lattice here, whoops, make sure I'm not selecting the geometry, but I am selecting the actual lattice. There we are. Let's see, is it gonna move for me? There we go. Has basically this mode called local mode. This mode here is turned off as a default. And you can see we get this nice kind of organic kind of deformation across all of these what are called quadrants of the lattice, these little squares. Now the difference though is that the default, which you have on right now, has something more like this. It has local mode turned on, and what basically that just means is that the vertices that fall within this quadrant of the lattice or within this square of the lattice are localized only to be affected by that section of the lattice. So you're not going to get a fall off between the different quadrants. So typically when we're using this for modeling, we want this local mode off, so you get a little bit of a nicer organic kind of curvature and whatnot. So to do that, we want to turn it off. So I'm going to select my arm of the glasses, and I'm going to go into again the lattice, so deform, lattice option box. And we just want to turn use local mode off and apply. So you get this cage that goes around whatever you selected. It could be just more. It could be more than one object. In this case, it's just the arm. And what we want to do is modify this so that basically we have just a few kind of control points, areas of control points. So in this case, maybe 3, 2, and 2, for example. We can move a lattice points around similar to a polygon's vertices. You just right-click on the lattice. Make sure it is on the lattice. So typically when I right-click on something, I try to make sure it's not overlapping other objects I could accidentally click on instead. So with the lattice, for example, I'm kind of over here away from the geometry. And then we've got this lattice point option. So it's just like polygon vertices that allow me now to go in and modify. In this case, I want to change the curvature a little bit of this. So I have this nice kind of bend to the arm. Similar to the bend that we have here. Maybe the one I have at the moment is a little bit extreme. It's a little bit too much. So let me just take this one back a bit. And I'll just pull it back just a little bit here. Just so that there's a nice kind of gradual bend to this overall. And then I can angle that. The cool thing with the lattice too is it maintains volume within the lattice. So it does a really good job of not kind of crunching up areas and things like that. So a little bit different from the soft mod tool. Make sure you do delete history on this. If you don't, your object can move through the lattice. So you get that double transformation thing, same as before as well. So we can prevent that from happening just by, once you're happy with everything, which, that's okay. We can go into Edit, Delete by Type History, if I can get over there. And again, it'll just lock it into place.
Can we merge together and move it?
Yeah, so you do get a double transformation. So even if you group it, let me see here. Yeah, so you can see that they're both moving together. You get that double trans going on. So if you want to move it, you would just move the lattice and the object will move along with it, go along for the ride. So whatever you do to this, scale or translate or rotate or whatnot, the object is in there, it's not doing anything. But as soon as you're ready to have this rigged or move independently, you want to remove it from the lattice by either duplicating it or deleting history. We can use lattices for rigging, which is why it's under the rigging category. And there's things we have to think about, with the double transformations and whatnot. But they are a good modeling tool as well, just for kind of distorting and shaping things the way I just did. All right, so we got an arm. I don't know if I'm going to make the other arm just yet. We've got a little bit of time. Let's create the glass component, and maybe I will spend a little bit of time on the surface creation tools, or the curve creation tools. Again, just because we touched on it this morning, I didn't have a lot of time near the end, but I should have maybe 10-15 minutes. They're pretty straightforward. They're tools you'd find in all 3D software packages. They're the very basic tools that existed even back in the 1980s on the Amiga and stuff like that, your revolve tools and things like that. But again, they could be useful for some things perhaps. I was hoping to actually avoid them altogether, but they're probably good to know about. So to start, let's create our lens for the glasses. And we're going to start by doing this, creating this from a curve essentially. Now we can generate curves from polygon edges. So we'll select a loop. Now before we do, let me just duplicate this geometry out, just so I keep my low res. And actually, let me undo that. Before we do, we probably need to combine this still, which I forgot we haven't really talked about yet. We combined it, sorry, not to confuse you, but we haven't merged it. When I say merge, you know, this is one piece, this is one polygon object now. But we do have these different shells. If I double click on any face, it's going to highlight the shell it's associated with, and you'll know there's a clear gap in between the two halves. So if we want this to be a seamless piece, we want to now go through and merge those vertices. So how do we do that? What is merging? Again, I'm going to take a look on a very basic object here. All right, so we've got one, similar to our glasses, we've got a left and right side. I want to combine them into one piece. So there's these merge tools here in the modeling module under Edit Mesh. Right here, merge and merge to center. But to be honest, you should know they're there. I access it through another contextual menu. There's a lot of these. By holding down Shift and the right mouse button, you get some additional keys. So for example, if you want to quickly access the multi-cut tool, which is something you'll do quite a lot, there it is right there. If you want to access any of the extrude, so for example, if I have a face selected, and I want to do an extrude on that, there's the face extrude. Or if I have an edge selected, there's the edge extrude. So again, it's going to contextualize based off of what you have selected, which is cool. And we also have the merge tools, which are at the top here, which go to an additional menu. Well, that one looks kind of new. What does that do? Sorry, let me just see this here for a second. Anything? Cool. All right, that makes it easy. It's my new favorite tool. It'll merge an entire border edge together. Awesome. I think that must be new. Anyhow, we'll use that probably, but let me show you some of these other ones too. So basically, we've got just going over to edges, and again, Shift, right mouse button. If I can, there we go. Shift right. Okay, where am I here? Shift. There we go. Merge vertices. So we got a bunch here. We're starting with the target weld tool. This one's pretty cool. I do like this one. Visually, it's kind of neat, but it just takes too long, so I don't use it. But it's kind of fun to demo. So basically, what you can do is you can, whenever you hover over a vert, it turns red. And if I hold down on that, we get this little line that pops up. And basically, this where we let go is where it combines into one vertex. So essentially, these merge tools are taking two vertices or multiple vertices and turning them into one, essentially. So I can very quickly go through and start combining this and merging these together. So again, where we've merged them, this is now one vertex. Okay, just so we're clear. We also have this guy, which is the merge to center option, and which technically is a little bit better because it is physically combining them, but finding an average distance between the two, and then just merging them down to a center point. I'm just hitting the G key to redo the last command. Just gotta be careful with this one, because you could technically merge a lot of stuff down to one point, which could cause some problems if you select the wrong things. So just be careful with that one. I use it sometimes, to be honest, but I don't use it exclusively. Typically, I'll use this option here, which is the merge to just the merge tool, and I'm going to access the option box for it. So I'll just grab it from the menu in this case, but it is there in the contextual, the marking menu, just right here, merge vertices, option box. Or again, under the Edit Mesh, merge option box, same thing. This one's cool. It's based off of distance. So if you're over top of this distance, which is based in units, it's only going to merge two vertices. So for example, if I have 2, if I'm beyond this tolerance or the threshold value, it's going to merge that. But if I have more than 2, it's going to look towards this threshold value. Now this works based off of the unit size, as I mentioned. So if I zoom in here, and we can see, well, this is 1. This represents 1 here, so that would be this. So if I go apply, that's going to merge everything down. Now, if we, like our glasses, where we snapped everything to that grid, those vertices are directly on top of one another within a 0.00000% distance, search distance. They're like literally right on top of each other. So the cool thing is if we go with a very small value, so typically like 0.001 or 0.0001, basically I can do a big rectangle select over an area, and anything within that tolerance range will get snapped and anything that's not won't. So for example, if I have these 2 rows here, and they're, I'd say that's within maybe 0.01 value, and I go over everything, so only things that are within this search area will actually get merged, and we can see there that they indeed got merged down to 1. Nothing else did though. So it's a quick way to merge everything within your selection without affecting things you don't want to actually move or get merged. Now there's that new option, which is pretty awesome. And I wonder if this works on things like circles and cylinders. Let me grab a cylinder here and check this out, because this could speed things up for us if this works. There we are. All right, so let me just add a couple divisions here. And let me delete this middle. And let's do this. So I'm going to select one border edge, select another border edge. We got 2 border edges. And what I'm going to do is go to Shift, right click, merge, merge border edges. And there's a tolerance. So again, similar to the one I just did with the merge, just the merge tool. So let's go a little bit higher, like 1. Cool, and it's merged. That's easy. I like this one. This one's good. I'm going to use that on the glasses then. Well, it's actually faster doing it the other way with this, because we are dealing with edges that are directly on top of each other. It would become tricky to actually, it would be, but maybe I don't even have to select a border edge for this. Maybe I just need to select the object. Let's try this again. So I'm going to go into, well, it's not giving me the option then. Let's go to edges. Let's do this again. Border edge. No, nothing. You need a border edge selected. Yeah, so actually this way isn't actually time saving if your points are directly on top of one another. So instead you would just do this. Rectangle select over that entire area. Make sure you get the entire loop. If you get anything beyond that, don't worry about it. It's not going to move because of our tolerance is so low. We just want to make sure our merge vertice tolerance is set low, so 0.001 is probably a good bet. Unless you're dealing with really, really tiny pieces of geometry, and then it would be different. And then apply. There we go, it worked. I can tell it worked just visually, because you can see here where we get this nice kind of more curvature arc at the nose. And this is what it looks like when it's not merged. So it's a little bit more angled going into it. So again, if I click on that, you can see that this gets a nicer transition across where things are seamless. Cool. That's awesome. I got one piece. All right, lenses. And I got to keep an eye on the clock again. Sorry, because I do have to zip downtown after this. I can hang around a little bit later tomorrow, though, at lunch too, if you guys have questions. All right. So I want to extract an edge from this so I can create my glass element for this. There's other ways we can do it. Obviously, we could take a sphere or an object, use a lattice, and shape it and morph it into that, which is viable. It's a perfectly acceptable way of doing something like that. Or we can do it the way we're about to. Before we do, though, I need to extract an edge, but I want it to be slightly higher resolution, so there's no gaps from this low-res version. So I'm going to need to smooth this first before I can extract my edge. So we might want to just duplicate it and hide the duplicate. Now you can hide objects, which we haven't really talked too much about yet. You can hide an object by simply selecting it and hitting H for hide. That hides it. You can bring it back. If it's the last hidden thing, we've only hidden the one thing, so we can bring it back by hitting Shift H. Now let's say I've got multiple objects there. And basically what I want to do is I want to, I'm hiding them in no specific order. Shift H only brings back the last hidden object. So if you want to bring back any of the others, you want to go through your outliner. And it's typically a good idea just having the outliner open in a separate window while you're working. Any object that is hidden will appear to be lightly grayed out in the outliner. And to bring something back from the outliner is the same as bringing something back the way I showed you before, Shift H. So Shift H will also bring back anything that's selected. So H will hide something, Shift H. If nothing's selected, will, oh. They changed that. Maybe that, it used to bring back the last selected object, but maybe it's only bringing it back because it's still selected. They've modified this then. So Shift H will only bring it back if it's actually selected. Yeah, so let me hide it, unhide it, yeah. So you do have to select it in the outliner, Shift H will bring it back. Earlier versions of Maya, Shift H would bring back your last hidden object as well. Control Shift H will bring back the last hidden object. Control Shift H, so if you hide something, so if I hide it, deselect it, Control Shift H will bring back that last hidden object now. So it's still there, just slightly different. All right, Shift H will hide hidden objects that are selected, unhide hidden objects that are selected. H hides any selection, and Control Shift H will hide the last hidden object. All right, there we go. So I am going to select this, duplicate it, and just hide it for now. And then I want to smooth this by going to the Mesh menu, Smooth. So now I'm in level 1 smoothing, but again, it's going to look, smooth enough, unless you get really close in on it. But that's probably enough to grab a curve from. So I'm going to zoom in on this crevice here. And I'm going to grab an edge from this just by double clicking on one of these middle edges here. We can convert any polygon edge into a curve by going through the Modify menu, Convert, and we can convert polygon edges to curves right there. So we do have a curve that runs through the middle of that. Now I can see here that this curve is not planar. And why is that important? Well, planar just means flat. It's not perfectly flat. I can see here on the edge it goes across and then it tapers up slightly. For this to work, we're going to use an actual operation called the planar operation, which generates surfaces from flat curves. So for example, if I had a let me just grab a couple circles. Or if I had text or some kind of vector graphics from Illustrator. Okay. Basically, we can select, 1, if I just want a circle, or all, if I want this cut out, all the holes would be cut out. Provided they're perfectly flat and directly in line with one another. So again, something from Photoshop or Illustrator would be. We can go to the Surfaces menu, and this is in the Modeling module. And I'll just tear that off for now. And we've got this option here, which is planar. And let me just reset mine because I was doing something with the other group this morning. So let me just switch it back to the default. Which will generate a surface from that. So the default is a NURBS object though. So we're getting a NURBS patch. And you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't look like a patch, because if you recall from when I was talking about NURBS, patches can only be squares. Technically, NURBS use a cheat. If I were to bring up the hulls or control vertices, you can see that they exist in a patch-like fashion here, in a square fashion, all the way around the object. So this is referred to as a trim. So it's kind of trimming the surface, creating a cheat with visibility, essentially. Which is fine. We could use NURBS loosely if you wanted to. But typically I'll use these to generate polygonal objects from. The problem with the type of geometry we get is that you do get a lot of triangles and junk around the edges typically. So if you're not going to smooth it, it's fine. But if you're going to smooth it, then it could become a lot more work than it's worth. And to do this, again, we're using the planar option box. So under surfaces, planar option box. And we're going to select polygons. And what I want to do is just modify this so that this will apply to all the other curve operations if I do any others today. I like going to General. And what this does is allows me to customize the number of polys that fit within that surface. The default is 3 and 3. I could change this maybe 20 and 20 as a default, so it comes in slightly higher, and I can always reduce that later if I want to. And quads. I want to make sure it's coming in as quads, otherwise it'll be a triangulated surface. And apply. And you get this quad-related surface that comes up. Now you can see we're getting a little bit of junk around some of these holes. But you know, this is a level 1 smoothing. It looks circular to me, so I don't know if you would really need to smooth that. If you did, you would have to go in and do extensive cleanup, which makes it maybe not worth it, because you have triangles everywhere on this, right? But we can still go in and extrude it. And we can do a bunch of things with the extrudes as well to create more customized looking types of geometry. Now you can see this is where things break apart if I want to do anything super fancy with that. But you can definitely go in and do just basic simple extrudes though, and that is fine. This is the basis of how Maya does its 3D text, 3D type, which I can show you at a later date. So basically that's the start of the glasses, or the glass component of the glasses. We've got a curve. I just have to make sure that it's planar, so perfectly flat. So to do that, I'm going to have to snap it flat, probably to the grid. So I'm going to select the curve. To do that, I'll just do a rectangle select over everything, then Control select the frame to deselect it. I'm going to right click in an open area just so I can easily turn on the curve points for the curve. Not curve points, sorry. Control vertices. And I'm just going to snap it forward. There we go. I can always pop it back into the frame after. And I think that should have snapped. Oh, it won't because I'm not using world. So just make sure I'm on world when I do this so it snaps perfectly flat. There we go. So now when I select that curve, if I've got my planar option still visible, I go apply. I now have a glass element that's perfectly matched to the inside of the groove, which I can go in and extrude if I want to. And then I could go in with a lattice. Remember, we were just looking at lattices. I can go into lattice. So create. And again, a lattice will give you a better result than using the B key. Remember, the B key is that soft mod tool. This does a decent job if I wanted to add in a little bit of a, which actually that's not too bad once I pop it back in a little bit. A lattice will give us probably an even better result, I think, personally. So if I select that, go into the rigging, deform lattice, and just give it some equal divisions, like maybe 4 by 4 by 4. I can just select the middle section here, and just bring this out a little bit. Whoop, turn my soft mod off. Bring this out a little bit, and that should give me a decent result, I think. It depends on how curved we want this. Which doesn't look too bad. And then I can delete that. Edit, delete by type history. Cool. Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of time to work on the hinge. Let's just clean this up, and then I'll show you maybe one other curve operation, and then we'll call it a day for now. So first thing I'm going to start by just labeling things. Let's just get rid of things we don't need. So we only have elements that we want in our scene. All right. The image plane, I would prefer you don't hand any files in down the road with image planes in them. I could just easily just delete it. That's how we get rid of it. And delete the display layer as well. We'll do that at the very end, though. Let me incrementally save, though, before I do that. So increment and save. There we go. I'm going to label some things, and then I'm just going to combine these into a hierarchy and get the other side working as well. Question?
Just a quick question. I was a little behind. I didn't expect to refer into a polygon.
For this guy?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me... Sure. I've deleted my curve, but let me just create a different curve, and you just have to make sure it's planar, otherwise it won't work. So again, you just have to ensure that you take those CVs and snap them forward just to the plane, to the grid, I should say, with the X key. Once you got that, we're just going to the surfaces, planar, option box. So again, surfaces, planar, option box. And once you're in there, basically all I did was I turned on polygon so I get a polygonal object. Otherwise, then I'm dealing with NURBs, which have limitations. I'm turning on quads, general, and giving it a starting division of 20 by 20. If I know for a fact I'm not going to smooth it, I might go a little bit higher for this, just so that I don't have any kind of weird lumps or angles and things like that. Pardon me? My curve? That's because I extracted the curve from the geometry. And we can do that again by going into edges. And if I double click on one of the interior edges, where this is actually where I want the glass to fit into, I'm going to then go to the modify, where is it, convert, polygon edges to curve, and that will give me a curve right there. There we are. That's perfectly matching my geometry. Now the problem though is that you can clearly see that there's a bit of a angle here. This isn't planar, it won't work. So we have to make it flat add our object, and then warp the object back into that kind of position. So there is still a little bit of manual work involved. Otherwise, but we need it to be flat. Otherwise, it won't actually do it. Once it's flat, like it is now, then I can do the operation on it, and then I can extrude it. I just can't smooth it though because we have all these triangles everywhere. But I could put a lattice on that, or I could just use the B key, and I could add a bit of a distortion to it if I wanted to, where I needed it to be. And then it's just a matter of just popping it back into the frame. Now you can see, I'm sure you guys can see this as well. With my latticed version, it's a smooth object. It's a very smooth object. But with the soft mod tool, and it seems like an easy thing to do, and it is convenient, but for somebody looking at this, we do have this kind of weird shadow right here. That's distortion in the geometry. That would get marks taken off or frowned upon in the industry. So we want to make sure it's nice and fluidly smooth when you're looking at it. So again, a lattice allows for that rather easily. All right. So what I'm going to do is, or you could just use a lattice on like a sphere or something and avoid the curve thing altogether. You could obviously warp stuff into place, and there's a variety of ways we can do the same thing. So I'm going to name some stuff, starting with the lens. This is our left. So lowercase l for the left, lowercase r for the right. That's the prefix, underscore, lens, underscore geo.
Is there any reason why you don't use uppercase?
I use uppercase, that's good, only for the suffix. It just makes selecting things a lot easier down the road. So for example, let me label this and then I'll just show you a quick example. So this is left underscore arm, we'll just call it arm geo. So we can also select things through how they're labeled. Up here at the top, there's this little arrow right beside the sign in, which opens up this coordinate-based tool. But if we click on that little kind of targeting system icon, I don't know what it is, but this targeting thing, we can select by name. And then we can start using some scripting approaches too for selecting things. So elements like star, for example. So let's say I want to select all geo in my scene. I could type in star underscore geo, and then all of the geo, anything labeled with that suffix will get selected. Or let me just, you guys, I'll do this again in a second, but let me just quickly create a right side. And again, I'll do this very quickly, do it in a second. So select, modify. All right, so I've got a left and right side now. So it just makes it easy too to select with the R underscore, because typically there won't be similarly labeled things. And it's only going to select the right side, or L underscore will only select the star, the left side elements. Very quick to select various components. Capitals I reserve only for the suffix at the end, just so that I know there won't be any of those combination of letters in any of the naming, because it is case sensitive. Different studios have different approaches. Ask me the same thing 10 years ago, and I would have said only capitals for the left and the right. That's all I used back then. But again, this is a bit more industry standard, the lowercase for the differentiation. It's abstract. 10 years from now, it could be something else. But currently, that's kind of the standardized approach. somewhat. Every studio has a different way of doing it. Hey, good news. Double Negative is coming in as an impromptu lecture next Monday. They're one of the bigger companies out of England. They do a lot of credits and commercials and a variety of work. It's at 3 o'clock on Monday, which it will cut into our class time, but it's probably beneficial, I think, to go to. So if you guys are up to that, we can do that next Mondays. I think it's open for everybody. But I'll find out more information. I'm sure Noel will let you know as well because he's organizing it. So I just found out in an email. So that'll be next Monday though. We could always make up that time at some point, I'm sure, somehow. But all right. But you could always ask Double Negative, how do they differentiate between left and right? And let's see what they say. It'd be interesting to find out. I'm assuming it's going to be relatively similar. All right. So we got our naming for the one side. Let me get rid of that group of stuff. There we go. Frames. I'm going to label this one frame _ geo. All right. So we got frame. Okay, let me see. I'm just going to get rid of things I don't need. There we are. What I'm going to do next is group these guys together. I'm lying. I'm not going to group them just yet. I'm only going to group the left side elements. So a quick way to create right side elements is to do this. You select your left side elements, group them together, so Control G. The default for a group will throw the pivot directly at origin, which when we're doing negative scaling, that's what we usually want to scale across. And then if I just type, duplicate it, sorry, so Control D for duplicate. And if I scale that now, -1, it throws it over to the negative side. Now if I open this up, you'll see that I've got 2 copies now of the left and right. I'm going to keep them in their groups for renaming purposes. If I take everything out of the groups now, basically you get versioning attached to them. For some reason it's not, oh yeah, sorry. You get versioning associated with them. So you'll notice that on all the duplicates, although these are the original ones, I guess, but it's giving me a 1 at the end. Maya requires unique naming, and if you don't have unique names, you do run into some issues later on, especially around rendering time or dynamic simulations, things of that nature. So you do need the unique names. So a quick way to do this is select the group, in this case the right group, and then there's an operation, just like using WordPad or Microsoft Word, a search and replace names. So under modify, we've got, and this is a good one to add to your shelf. I use this one all the time. And the one above it too, prefix hierarchy names, is a good one also, which we'll talk about later. Search and replace names. And what we want to do is search for L_ and replace with R_. Now, you know, we only have the 2 things, so it probably would have been just as quick to just manually do it. This is more beneficial when you have like 100 or 1,000 things you need to rename. This does it instantaneously. All right, so now I can take those 4 items out of their groups. Everybody retains their proper naming. Question at the back.
Sorry, so for the search and replace option,
Yeah.
I think it'd be good to mention that you have to have it on selected. You have to have selected.
You do.
If you have it on hierarchy, just renames everything essentially.
That's right, which the default should be selected though, I believe. Let's see, because I think maybe you're right, it is hierarchy, which explains why I selected the hierarchy for it, in this case group 2, and it renamed everything below it essentially. So if you have other elements in your hierarchy, yeah, it's going to rename those elements as well. So yeah, you can do a couple things. So modify, search and replace names. So you could also do selected or all will go and look at everything in your entire scene. I'll typically keep it at hierarchy, to be honest, just because you're usually doing groups of items that you've probably mirrored over, just like what we did. So it's just a bit easier to not have to individually select everything within it. And all right, so let's unparent those guys. Delete the groups. And last thing I'm going to do, just to clean this up, is select all those pieces of geometry and group them together, Control G, and label that group glasses underscore GRP for group. Now we're not done. This is still not a very good grade, simply because if I look at some of these pieces of geometry, I still have transformations all over the place, and some probably still have construction history associated with them. So we can fix that easily just by doing a big rectangle select over everything. So everything's selected. I can see that in the outliner, everything that blue color. And we're going to do two things. If I'm really not able to speak today, hopefully I can communicate in class this evening and see what happens. So we're going to go to modify, freeze transformations. Now I've added like 3 of these for some reason to my desktop. But freeze transformations, that'll zero everything out, so that sets this position as the default for all of the geometry. And then what we want to do is delete by type history. So edit, delete by type history. And that will just clean out all the construction history on all the pieces of geometry. And then we can save it. And even though we didn't do the hinges, because we only have 15 minutes, you know, it's a finished file that we could submit. And structurally, it's all there. You know, missing some hinges, but you know, labeling-wise, you'd get a great mark for that. And then if you want, you can play around with shaders and things of that nature, which I'm not really going to do at the moment. But let me just throw on, since I do have polygons this afternoon, I could put a DX11 shader on the. Let me see, where are you? DX11? Oh, I don't have it turned on. Let me just activate that plugin. And I know you're in there somewhere. Anybody see it? Let me just redo it. So DX11. There you are. And then, which allows me to do things like opacity, reflections, not just regular for reflections, but for null reflections, which I'm sure you'll be talking about shortly. Let me see, specularity, opacity, a little bit shinier, and reflections. So I just turn on a reflection map, maybe 2D spherical, and let me just grab a HDRI image. I think I have one in Jones folder. But this is where copying and pasting, making sure your source images are all in a predictable directory. There we go. So we can actually have some real reflections in there and everything, which looks kind of neat, especially when they're moving. They're not, there's no, obviously there's no refractions or lens distortion, but it's kind of neat. And then we could add in a variety of other things to the wood grain, to the glasses. But all right, and that's the workflow essentially. So you set your project, you're working inside the project, saving incrementally as you go, making sure by the end you have everything labeled, properly organized, and the tools themselves are so far we haven't used a lot, but these are the ones so far that you'll probably use mostly. And then we'll touch on others as we get into the character starting tomorrow. Just the last 5 minutes before I let you guys, any questions? I guess we've got 10 minutes. Any questions? All right, I'm going to show you just a couple you can play around with, just because it came up this morning. A couple of these other surface creation tools. And then maybe 5 minutes, and then I'll let you guys do your thing. So let me see here. So create, NURBS, curve tool. Let me just do this. So we're looking at the CV curve tool the other week as one of the ways we can generate. Let me just use the X key to snap the first one to the grid. Generate, whoops. Curves. So the question came up this morning, well, how do you do like a revolve or something simple if you wanted to do like a wine glass or something like that? So we can use the these curve tools to generate geometry, similar to what we just did with the glasses within the frame. Maybe one more here and then across. There we go. And you know, if you find that things are too thick or thin, yeah, that's fine for now. So what we can do is we can take this geometry, or it's not even geometry yet, it's just a curve, and basically revolve geometry out of that. So through the surfaces menu, select your curve, we've got revolve. Again, I'm going to use polygons. You know, you can obviously use NURBS just to create very simple NURBS geometry. It's just a revolved plane, essentially. But I'm going to use polygons. So where are you? Polygons. Should remember all of my settings from before. So quads, general, the default number count, and apply. And again, it's going to try its best to match the shape given the number of polygons you've specified, so 20 by 20. As I increase these numbers, it's going to do a better job matching that shape. But again, we're going to end up with significantly more polygons as we do this. Now the cool thing though is that I can take this curve and I can still go in and modify it. So I can go in and, you know, let's say, you know, I don't like this base, it's a little bit too wide. I can go in and change some of these proportions a little bit to kind of better suit what I want. Or maybe I want this to flare out a little bit more on the side. And again, we can go in and kind of interactively shape it just by modifying the curve itself. Now you just got to be careful when you're doing this though, because you know things can become a little bit distorted if you go away from the planar kind of flatness of the curve. So here we can kind of see we're getting this kind of weird spiral thing happening. You might want that, but typically you want to keep it planar. So I'm only using, in this case, the Y and X arrows to modify the position. So again, it's just a matter of having a curve and clicking apply, essentially. You know, and you can duplicate out as you go. So you know, I could create a series of wine glasses, all different shapes and sizes, simply by just modifying my curve, essentially, which I can go in and duplicate out from, and you can create a variety rather quickly by not breaking that construction history that you've got going on. Which means I could probably apply that transparency map that I created. There we go. That's neat. All right. So you get the idea. Pretty straightforward. You know what? Let's save this for another day. If you guys are interested, there's a variety of things you can do. But you can also do the exact same thing just by doing what we've done with extruding, using primitive objects and whatnot. But we can, whoops, why did I do 2 wine glasses? I didn't want to do that. You could also loft between objects. There's a variety of these different curve tools that we could take a look at. They do various things, similar to what you can do anyway with just moving your points around. It's just different. Cool. All right. So 6 minutes. I'll let you guys kind of play around with this stuff for the last few minutes. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll come around, help you out. Tomorrow we are getting into the character. So at least become familiar with the tools we talked about last class and went over again today. If you could.
Just like a really quick question about the assignment or whatever.
Okay.
As
Yeah.
far as like the design goes, I know you specified only 2 objects, but can we use like objects that are associated with those 2 as well? And I
what?
asked that because so this is like a really shitty drawing.
Sure.
Basically,
No.
like my items were like a pencil sharpener and
Cool.
a egg beater. Yeah,
Mhm.
like one of those ones that were on the wall. And stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought like it might be kind of cool if like elements of like pencil shavings were used.
Oh, gotcha.
Could I do that? Like as sort of like costume elements?
Yeah, or pencil shaving like spiked hair. Or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
Like that.
I was
could be
thinking
cool.
like something like pigtails or
Yeah, that'd be
something
fun.
interesting.
Yeah, play
Okay.
around with that.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, I have a question about
Sure.
the hybrid.
Yep.
So is it, do we have to take 2 objects or it can be any number of objects?
Well, 2 is the requirement because you can get a lot of different components depending on what, like a radio, for example. If you were to take the shell off of it, you got tons of little things you could take and turn into wings or a variety of different things. So when you think of your objects, something that, if you want to do something more complex, has a lot of maybe interior kind of components to it possibly. And
Okay, and is it just electronics or it can be any object?
any industrial designed objects. So
Okay.
not like a teddy bear or something like that, but
So anything industry design?
yeah, something industrial design. So like a radio or like a microphone or I don't know, like even a desk. This might be too simple,
And
perhaps.
does it have to
but,
be to scale? Like if I have this
Mhm.
and then I have a computer screen, so
Mhm.
can I scale this to fit my
You could,
arms?
yeah.
for
So let's say you wanted this to be a head, you could like scale it up and have it larger. So it doesn't have to be to scale, no. Yeah. Question?
Same thing.
Okay, cool.
I just kind
Yeah.
of have a sketch.
Sure.
I'm looking to go for something. This is like a very rough.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah. Like this is like a projector like thing with the lens.
Oh, gotcha. Kind of like what's up there.
Yeah, something like that.
Gotcha.
Which acts as like the head or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So you think something like this would?
Yeah, it's neat. It reminds me a little bit of. Do you remember old Transformers like Shockwave?
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, that's cool.
And we
Something
are
like that.
allowed to add other elements, right? Like elements which are necessarily not in those 2 things.
A little bit of that. But I mean, the main focus will be the model. But if you have time and you want to embellish things a little bit,
No, I
When it comes to the
mean,
legs and
like,
stuff, you can't really.
Like if it's a robot and
Yeah.
I chose a radio and probably a microphone.
okay.
So maybe to make the feet, can I just make generic robot feet?
Oh,
or I have to
gotcha.
Add something.
I would use it through duplicating existing parts, right? Because I'm sure you could find enough intricate, randomized looking things that you could kind of shape into like a robot looking foot, I'm sure. And,
Okay,
yeah.
so that way we could do.
Awesome.
Can you come to my?
Sure, yeah. Okay. I just have to keep an eye on the clock. Unfortunately, I've only got 2 minutes, guys, and I'm going to run. Let me just save the recording, and then stop.